Hi, Robin. How lovely to see you again. Always a pleasure. So you and I have known each other now for a few months. We met briefly on the phone just before Christmas when you had a few queries about your CLL. And you very kindly joined our WhatsApp group, which has been a great support because you're very, very involved in that. And all the WhatsApp group is very grateful for that. And also we've met on Zoom a couple of times. So thank you for telling your story. It's a very interesting one. And why don't you start? Tell me when you were diagnosed, Robin.
It's about 7 years ago, somewhere around about 2014, and it was discovered by another medical intervention from a blood result, which was suggesting that I had the very early stages, and that ran on until Christmas of last year when things sort of escalated. But that's the period of time, about 7 years.
And during that time, did it get steadily? Did it change steadily, or was it sort of going, wham? How did it work for you last year?
Last year was a repeat of the first 6 years, which basically grew slowly until the point of almost the end of the year, where it suddenly all sort of escalated up, with all the white blood cell count results going higher, and my spleen also being a worry and a concern to the doctor. And then that's when it sort of touch base, as it were, with reality.
You, I think, were a pioneer in your treatment, if I'm correct. And you were one of the first people in your area to be offered a new treatment that had just been licensed by NICE, which I can never say. I can say the venetoclax bit, but I'm just going to have to read the other bit because seriously, I can never say it at all.
Well done. I was hoping you might do this.
So we might call it V&O from now on, shall we, Robin?
But I think just call it those from now onwards, because we both know what we're talking about and we won't trip ourselves upside down.
Absolutely. So you went to you were having your sort of 3 monthly or 6 monthly checks, and they offered you this new treatment. And were you aware that it was a brand new treatment?
In fact, not in the early days. No, it was only when I started reading more about it, when I became more imminent as to having it, and I then started reading it and, saying, "Oh, yes, it is brand new. It's probably one of the most active and best treatments that you can get at the moment."
And did they say to you, "Well, you'd be a good candidate for it because of your age or your health"?
It was offered to me just purely and simply as the choice of treatment that they suggested, with no alternatives being given at that time. But as I've grown with it, as it were, over the last 3 months, basically I've started to ask the questions as to its relevance to me as an individual. And they've given me very strong answers as to why they chose it.
And what has it said?
Well, against its cost in the first instance, because I know roughly how much it costs. I think my breakfast cost me about £180 every day. But versus that cost, the potential outcome for the treatment from these two drugs is really, really significant and really good.
It's a year-long treatment, isn't it? It's not like ibrutinib. You're not on it indefinitely. It's a packaged treatment of 1 year.
It's a packaged treatment of 1 year, and that was part of the suggestion for the treatment. And that basically the long-term effects of having alternative treatments were going to put your body under different conditions and different strains. And they decided that they wanted to do away with that in this instance, which I'm very lucky to be the recipient of. And 10 minutes before this video call, I was actually talking to one of my daughters about it. And she's a statistician working for the government, compiling figures for coronavirus and other figures like this. And she can fully understand what they've said and why they've said it.
And do you think COVID had any effect on the decision to give you this as a treatment, or is it just basically your age, your health, you're a very fit man, and also the fact that it had just been licensed, so it was fantastic treatment in a 1 year package?
I think the expectations for the drug combination has been so good that's why they suggested it in that respect, linked in with my health. But the hospital has been very mindful in terms of, as we all have, in terms of the COVID control. And on a regular basis, you find yourself walking into a maternity unit in the hospital, because we were mixed in with the maternity patients as well as ourselves. And that was it, as a separate entrance into the hospital.
And talk me through how the treatment worked for you. I've got to say that word again, obinutuzumab.
Tuzumab, yes. I think the ending bit is tuzumab.
What did they give you first out of the two drugs? Venetoclax or the O one?
Well, I'm going to say OB in the case of the word complexity, but I had the OB first of all, and I had a regular dose delivered over the first 2 days of the actual treatment. So that I had a test trial on the first day, and the second day was the delivery of the rest of the treatment.
Did that bring your spleen right down?
In fact, I don't know at this stage, because basically I've got a CT scan booked for next week. And the CT scan is to investigate the lymph nodes and also my spleen. Part of her investigation on me was obviously looking at my lymph nodes, but also looking at my spleen. And she said she could certainly feel it.
When were you given the venetoclax?
I was given that, I think it was after 3 weeks of the OB by itself. I was then started on the lower dose of the venetoclax, and that was a 5-week regime, leading up to the point where you were actually then having it at its maximum strength.
And did you have to stay in hospital at all? Were they worried about tumor lysis syndrome?
They were worried about tumor lysis syndrome, but by that stage already, I'd stopped having the extra drug with my intravenous for the OB, which was counteracting the tumor lysis. It's a huge regime. You basically have to have a blood test before you take your first venetoclax. Then you have to have another blood test after you've taken the first pill to find out what effect it's had on your body. And then you get permission to take the first week's course. And then you have to repeat the process weeks 2 to week 5, where eventually you're then at the maximum strength. So I was spending 3 days a week at hospital for the first 5 weeks.
I think that's quite interesting compared to, say, being given ibrutinib or calibrutinib, where you just almost start taking a pill. It's interesting how intense the V&O treatment is, actually.
My specialist, or my cancer nurse, one of the Marie Curie nurses, basically she said to me that it was going to be a huge commitment in terms of time. And I said to her, despite if my treatment goes well, can I possibly consider going to work? And she said, during the start of this particular treatment, there was no consideration of me being able to work because of the time constraint and the numbers of visits to hospital.
So at the beginning, it's a time commitment and a commitment in lots of other ways as well, mentally, physically, all sorts of things. But when does that sort of intense period end? When could you go back to work if you wanted to?
In fact, in my own case, and this is primarily based on COVID and the reduction of COVID, I couldn't in actual fact, and it's been suggested that I stay off work for the rest of this year.
So that's a COVID thing rather than a V&O thing?
COVID thing rather than the treatment thing. Because feeling as I'm feeling at the moment, I wouldn't want to go back to my position full time because I'm a chef lecturer by trade and I'm working with 16 students perhaps at a maximum basis in the kitchen at a time. That I think I would find too much to do initially.
But for anybody watching, if they're going to go on this treatment, and so they'd have to be aware that at the beginning it's intense and you have to not work, and maybe somebody gets offered this at age 35, something like that. So they could maybe they take 5 weeks or something at the beginning. In fact,
as a total period of time, I would say 8 weeks.
Okay, well that's
interesting. Start of treatment, yeah.
And that might make people think, well, potentially I'll do, if they're working and they don't want to take that time off, they'll do ibrutinib or calibrutinib or something like that. So it's quite important, I think, to anybody watching to have conversations with their consultant about their lifestyle. The best thing about your treatment is it's a package 1-year treatment. So at the end of that year, you're hopefully MRD negative.
Indeed so. I'm a free man and able to go back to work and continue basically my normal life.
I mean, that is just absolutely fantastic. Thank you again. I wanted to say, I said at the beginning what a support you've been to CLL support. Tell us a bit about the WhatsApp group and anything you've got out of it.
I've always been a bit of a person that takes a sort of practical approach on what I would say were problems or normal life issues. And the couple of people that I've actually been talking to more closely from the group, one is a fully qualified pharmacist, and so qualification-wise than me, a different sort of area of life. I find that it's very useful, very helpful to be able to actually use my own sort of basic practical lifestyle to talk to somebody like that in sense of how they approach their own medication, for instance. And a guy very similar to myself, working for British Airways, we've had some very topical conversations in regards to the practical application, for example, of working within our own industries and having a life with, sharing a life with cancer, sharing a life with CLL. And both of us finding the same things. He's active, I'm active. I played golf this morning. Tomorrow is going to be a long bike ride. It's going to be about 6 hours. As a motorbike, by the way. Sorry, I'm lazy. But it's a motorbike ride for about nearly 150 miles through Devon and Cornwall. So taking the situation and making it more practical. That's what I've done with the other guys.
Fantastic. So I think, to me, one of the things about you is you emphasise living well with CLL, which is what CLL support promotes.
It very quickly makes you think about other people when you're actually having your own treatment in hospital. You get that dreaded day. Yes, you have to go in for several hours. But I've met so many people that are in a different position to myself, and some of them with repeat processes and repeat cancers. But at the end of the day, we have in actual fact said to each other, let's live life positively with cancer.
Well, Robin, I think your story is very, very positive. And as I said, I'm very grateful for you to give up your time like this to come and talk to us. So thank you very much. And I think you're an inspiration. If anybody's thinking of doing B&O, you're very informative. I know you're on the WhatsApp group. You're available through CLL support to talk to people. So thank you very much. Very kind. Thanks, and Robin. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Gail. Thanks. Cheers. Thanks very much.